What's up, YouTube? This is Too Raw for TV. All right, so before I get into this video, I want to give a big shout out to the brother Aaron for showing love to the channel. Salute to you, brother, for showing love once again. Big time fan of the golden age of the NBA. And speaking of that, let's talk about what many people consider the greatest duel in NBA history, perhaps the greatest quarter in NBA history. Game 7 of the 1988 Eastern Conference semifinals between the Boston Celtics and the Atlanta Hawks, the fourth quarter in particular of that ball game. Now, let's set the scene here. Now, Boston, the mighty Boston Celtics, were not as mighty by this point. They were still a really good team, going 57-25 on the year. Larry Bird, that season, 87-88, statistically, may have just had his best overall season, averaging nearly 30 points per game that year on 53% shooting. I think he shot over 40% from three-point range and maybe close to 90% from the free throw line. Maybe about 9 rebounds, maybe about 7 to 8 assists a night. I mean, he was putting up monster numbers in a highly competitive NBA. But there were signs of slippage. The 57 games they won that year was 10 less than what they won 2 years earlier with the mighty 67-win team of 85-86. Bill Walton was all but done due to foot injuries. Kevin McHale was an actual shell of himself after that 1987, I think it was March 87, foot fracture, where he opted to continue to play on rather than shut the season down to have a season-ending surgery. He soldiered on, but he paid the price. He was never the same player after 1986-87. Robert Parrish was still ageless, but he was getting older. Danny Ainge was having a career year with the Boston Celtics, but ultimately that would be his last year. I think it might have been after that season. He was traded to the Sacramento Kings. Someone could correct me if I'm wrong. It might have been actually during the mid-season. I can't remember. But either during that season or after the season, he was traded to the Sacramento Kings. But anyway, more of what was going on was injuries, also the rise of other teams, in particular, the soon-to-be known as Bad Boy Pistons. They had risen to the point where they were legitimate competitors in the Eastern Conference. You had the rise of young Michael Jordan and the Chicago Bulls. You had the rise of the Cleveland Cavaliers and the Atlanta Hawks, who was their opponent in this semifinal series. You had Dominique Wilkins, who had won the scoring title in 85-86 and was averaging a then career high 30.7. I think that wound up being his career high, 30.7 points per game during the 87-88 season. Matter of fact, I think he only finished short to the scoring title by the great Michael Jordan, who averaged 35, who won his first MVP that year. But also on the Atlanta Hawks team, you had young Doc Rivers. You had Cliff Levingston. You had on that team also Kevin Willis. You had on that team, I believe, you had, what's his name? Tree Rollins. You had Antoine Carr. You know, you had a pretty damn good Atlanta Hawks team. But ultimately, would it be enough? Would it be enough? Dominique Wilkins was 6th in MVP voting that year, by the way. And Dominique Wilkins had risen from a guy who was an occasional highlight reel type player who people saw as one-dimensional to being a legit superstar in the NBA. So in this series, Boston, who was favored to win, actually trailed after 5 in that series, 3-2, with Atlanta going home for Game 6, looking as if they were going to dethrone the defending Eastern Conference champion Boston Celtics. Because the year before they went to the finals where they lost to the Lakers. But Boston, showing their experience and championship resolve, was able to win on the road. And Larry Bird guaranteed a victory in Game 7. But it was a hard-fought game going into that fourth quarter. And maybe, perhaps, if Kevin Willis hadn't ran his goddamn mouth, maybe Atlanta Hawks would have made history and beaten Boston. But he made a mistake. And according to Dominique Wilkins, Kevin Willis told Dominique Wilkins, who was largely guarding Larry Bird in that series, that game, don't let that motherfucker score another point. Talking about Larry Bird. Because the perception was, oh, he's shutting down Larry Bird. He's shutting him down because Bird had only had 14 points going into the fourth quarter. Bird was kind of facilitating, letting the game come to him, while Dominique Wilkins was going out there scoring furiously. I think he had like 30 points going into the fourth quarter. As a matter of fact, Dominique Wilkins would have a monster fourth quarter, scoring 17 points, finishing with 47. But Larry Bird, putting that team on his back, with Kevin Willis' disrespectful comments igniting him. They always say, don't talk trash to the great ones. Larry Bird's eyes lit up, and he went on an absolute tear. Whether it was jump shots, whether it was three-pointers, whether it was floaters, whether it was, fadeaway jumpers in the post, trick, offhand layups off the glass, whatever the case may be. Bird scored 20 points in the fourth quarter, including 9 of 10 from the field, outscoring Dominique Wilkins 20-17 in the fourth quarter, and helping the Boston Celtics eke out a victory, a Game 7 victory at the Boston Garden. That series will be the closest Dominique Wilkins would ever come to winning, going to an Eastern Conference Finals, winning a second round series, definitely. Closest he would ever come. And it wasn't due to his fault. He usually showed up and performed very well. The problem was his teams in Atlanta just weren't good enough. They weren't. And, Larry Bird ultimately and the Celtics would lose to the Detroit Pistons, I believe it was in 6 in the Eastern Conference Finals. And it was in that series that we first saw the sad truth, the sad reality about Larry Bird, and that was injuries would soon begin to overwhelm him. Limping around, looking rather stationary, not as fluid in his movements. Turned out he was suffering from bone spurs. He wound up with surgery, missed all but 6 games of the 88-89 season, came back in 89-90, but he never looked the same. Oh, he still was effective. He still was an all-star level player. Still was capable of averaging 29 and 7. Really good numbers. Really good player. And at times he could show flashes of that greatness. But his skills had diminished. His physical gifts had diminished. He was no longer the same top-tier, GOAT-level performer that we had seen in the 1980s. But for one shining night in 1988, in one memorable quarter, 2 MVP caliber players were at the top of their game, competing bucket for bucket as far as who would emerge victorious at Boston Garden. It was a stirring contest, but Dominique Wilkins blinked at the end. No shame in that, though. But anyway, tell me what you guys think.